Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our special council meeting for April the 2nd, 2024 at 5:36. Roll call, please.
Roll call. Councilmember Roth.
Present.
Councilmember Mann. Councilmember Soto.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Samra. Mayor Moran.
Present.
For the record, Councilmember Mann and Mayor Pro Tem Samra are not in attendance.
Can we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Ready, begin. If we can all please remain standing for a moment of silence for our first responders and military members, please. Thank you. May be seated. Next, we have citizen comments. Are there any citizen comments? Is there anyone on the phone? Hearing none, bringing it back to the chamber. Any citizen comments? Seeing none. Item number 6, we have our educational workshop, a status on current and future water projects.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, and members of the public, or staff in this case. So we're here to give you an update on the water system and the projects that are ongoing to address challenges that the city has had for a while. Just for the record, I'm Mario Gouveia, I'm the city engineer, and Nick Fontaine is our water resources engineer taking care of Livingston. So we'll go through this PowerPoint, and we'll try to do it in enough detail that try to relate the issues and the situations and the status of the water system. And I think maybe, I know we have at the end a slide for questions, but just stop us as we go and just ask questions. That way they're not all at the end. Go ahead. There you go. So we have on the agenda a few items here. Is the update on the water supply, and we'll go through the water system capacity assessment that we prepared in November, I believe, of 23. Yeah, November of 23. I'll go through that in some detail. And we do have the 1, 2, 3 TCP progress in terms of projects there and planning and design, which includes item 4, new wells. And we'll also touch on water line replacements. We haven't had those in quite a while, but we'll just go over the lines that are still outstanding as we know it, and then have a project summary with budgets, updated budgets, and then we can have questions. But like I said, we can go ahead and talk about any of these items as we go along. Nick will do a lot of the on the system. He'll do a lot of the presentation, and then I'll go over the capacity assessment. So go ahead, Nick.
As far as the current water supply, the city currently operates and maintains 8 active wells. It's well 8, 9, 11, 12, 13, 14, 16, and 17. Well 15 is currently on standby status due to elevated levels of manganese and arsenic. The firm production capacity is 7,200 gallons per minute, which is approximately the same as the maximum day demand. the following slides will go into more detail of that as far as how it was calculated, and those numbers were derived for that. The current capacity is not adequate to meet projected maximum day demand, which is calculated at 7,455 gallons per minute, or the peak hour demand based on the current proposed development projects. So that's with the consideration of existing wells, sources, and then the future development that's proposed.
Yeah, and that development is on entitled project, and it's and I'll go through that on the assessment, but it's the 480 units here on Main Street, the 80 units on B Street, and then a couple of the commercial projects, the ARCO, which is very small, and then across from ARCO, the truck stop there.
So that 7455, when you say, now that you projected as in when those projects
Yeah.
are
Constructed, yeah. And I'll go through I have a few scenarios here as we move forward. One of which is talking about that 480 unit complex here on the south side of the city, and how that affects these MDDs, and primarily MDDs, and what will happen until we get there. And then there's other things that I'll go through, but yeah, you are correct. The 74, 55, yeah, that one there is with those 4 projects.
Okay, and then the graph on the right there shows the water production over the last 10 years, and that's in millions of gallons. So it's the annual production on that, and you can see it's kind of fluctuated with one of the lows being around 2017 timeframe, and then between 2017 and 2020, it increased by about 36%, followed by a decrease of 26% between 2020 and 2022. And then between 2022 and 2023, it started projecting back up by about 14%.
And the assessment that we did, it actually stops here at 22 because we didn't have all the data for 23 when it was done. So it went from 20 to 10 years back. So there's a little bit of a increase there for 23.
Okay, next we're moving on to the water system capacity update, which was completed in November of 2023.
Okay. And I know this is tough to read. You're not going to be able to read that. I don't know do you have copies of, yeah, so you probably have to look at your, so I have one here that I can actually read. So on this first page, the 2 main criteria for doing these assessments is maximum day demand, MDD, and peak hour demand, PHD. When we do these, we have to follow the California Water Code, which has a lot of criteria that establish the parameters you can use. There's some leeway. There's different options on doing some of these calculations. I'll go through some of those. Here on this first page, what I'd like to mention is that well 19, the one that's on standby, not 19, 15, I'm sorry. Yeah, well 15 that's on standby. It's a small well, it has some quality issues, and it's been on standby for quite a while. By being on standby means that it's not abandoned, obviously, but it cannot be used unless it's an emergency situation, right, Tony?
That's correct.
Okay. So that's well 15. So well 15 is not counted here on the total capacity produced by the city. This is the other 8 wells, and which total a production of 9,200 gallons per minute. So that's the number we start with for a total capacity. Off of that, we have to determine what the firm capacity, and that's a term from the state. Firm capacity is your total capacity minus the biggest well. In Livingston, the biggest well is well 17 by far, and it's 2,000 gallons. So you take that off, and you end up with 7,200 gallons per minute. That's your firm capacity. So that's what's going to dictate if you do meet or do not meet your MDD. And I have it up here, the state criteria with the code numbers and the articles. But there's basically two ways to estimate your MDD. If you have data that actually, daily data that actually gives you the highest daily demand, you're supposed to use that. And the city does have that for the last 10 years. So if you go to the table down here, if you look in 2014, August of 2014 was the highest, and the maximum daily demand was 10.4 million gallons, which translates to that 7222 gallons per minute. So that is your demand. So your demand is 7222 when this was prepared. While we're here, I want to just mention that because you have to look at the last 10 years when the study is done, you have to get whatever is the worst, and the worst is 2024 is the highest. It's 2014. I'm sorry. It's the highest daily demand, which means that when you go into 2025, let me back up a little bit. If you were to do a study today, you already would drop the 2013 off, and you start at the top with 2023. So this would shift by a year if I did one today. If we do one a year from now, it means that the 2014 is going to drop, and you're going to have 23 at the top, you'll have 24, and then 14 will drop. Which means that your maximum daily demand will actually decrease. If you look at the numbers on this column here, there's the 7222 down here. That goes away, and that's the biggest number. And the next biggest number is actually the one right above it for 2015, which is 66, 67 gallons per minute. So in a year from now, you would actually gain 555 gallons per, and this is theoretical stuff, obviously, because it's based on the criteria that we have to use. So you actually would gain 555 gallons per minute of MDD. I know I'm throwing a lot of numbers. Do you want to stop me here for a little bit?
Quick question. So
Sure.
There's two different, obviously there's a lot of numbers, but if we look at what you're pointing to, which is the maximum daily demand, and if we look at, 2014, you're looking at 7222, which would be right at where our capacity right now.
Correct. Correct.
But I'm also looking at the peak hour demand.
Yeah, that's peak hour demand is basically your MDD times 1.5. Yeah.
And so that is concerning because,
Yeah, you haven't met that for quite a while.
Yeah.
Right?
So, even 2022 peak hour, maybe it was, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Whatever that was 8260.
Yeah.
So even if all the wells were at minimum production or maximum production minus the 2,000.
Yeah, minus the 2,000, you may not make that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So probably we made it because all of the wells were in production.
Correct.
Everything was functioning perfect, but in the real life scenario.
If you have one big well down or two wells, if you have two wells
Yeah,
down, it's a
we
challenge.
we would not be able to meet demand.
You would probably not meet
Peak.
peak hour demand by the wells themselves. If you have water stored in your tank, and you can use that, then you'll meet 4 hours of peak hour.
Okay,
I guess the catch here is you have to have the tank full.
yeah,
And I know the city fills it and uses it regularly, but if you had to have, if you had to, say, a big fire.
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
in the middle, and the tank is not full, then you may not have that 4 hour of PhD.
Yeah, I just like to look at the best case scenario, but also the worst case
And
scenario.
that's
'cause
what this
yeah,
does,
Yeah,
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
just one, thanks.
Yeah, yeah, it's not the worst case scenarios if all the wells failed, then it'd be in real trouble. So I'll go on to the next page here. So you'll see, let's see, what paragraph is that? You'll see here in this paragraph that without the development of those four entitled projects, you can meet 7,200 GPM, and the requirement is 7,222. With the difference is 22 gallons per minute, which is really negligible. So you're barely there meeting maximum day demand. And that's, of course, with the biggest well not on. In terms of the system's total capacity, that 9,200, of course, it doesn't meet the 10.8 like you mentioned here a couple minutes ago, and that's the PhD. The 9,200 does not count storage, and you're allowed to have storage for the tank, the storage. So the tank that you have, I think you can have fire flows for like 4 hours if it's full. If it's empty, then you have nothing. Yeah, it does take, it'll meet 4 hours of peak hour. I do have those four projects here that are entitled, and that we already mentioned, the Tierra Santa 80 residential unit project, the Villages at Maine, that 480 multifamily, and then the Arco, which is almost done now, and the trucks, the Moonglow truck stop, which should be coming on here within the next year. Probably take them a year to build it, at least half a year. So down here, this is the criteria used to actually calculate what the actual consumption per capita was based on, of course, your population, and based on data from the city, of course, has metered data, and it turns out that the residential consumption is about just over 25% of your production. So basically a quarter. The rest of it is mainly industrial. Most of it will be Foster Farms, and then you have other small stuff. Other industrial and whatever commercial you have comes out of that 75%. Yep. Any questions?
Yeah, is there a forecast, or, I mean, I know it's hard to probably use a number, but once those four projects are online, what would be the projected need that
I
we?
have that. It's the next page.
Okay, got it. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
You were reading my mind, right?
Yeah. So what we did here was that actually calculate what gallons per capita per day is. This table is, and then based on that, you can move to the next page. Based on that, you get the new MDD, which is that 7455, which is here, and that's taken into account the two multifamily projects here, the 480 plus the 80, and then the small, these commercial ones, which you can see the amount, the magnitude of the consumption compared to residential is negligible. Now, what I did for just to present to you tonight is, if you get off of the multifamily amounts, if you take off that 480 units, so you only have the 80 unit left, it gives you another 179 gallons per minute. So if you did that, you would already meet your MDD. So that will relieve that. Odds of that being built anywhere in the next 2-3 years are very slim. There's an approved map for that 480 unit development. It may or may not expire. That's up to the owner. They're entitled to have extensions. But even if say there's another year or two extension, then by the time that they come back with intention to construct, you're gonna have to go through all the improvement plans and the building plans, all those reviews, all of that. So it's ways out, yeah. And there might also be a chance that the owner of that is looking to sell it or piece it out. That's quite an 480 units, quite an endeavor. So by doing that, we by taking that 480 unit project out, you get an MDD of 7276, which is very close to what you can provide, which is 7200. So you're only 76 gallons per minute off on that. If you get to 2025 and you take those other 555 gallons per minute out of these calcs, you actually end up with a required MDD of 6721, and you can provide 72, so you would be okay. At least on paper, you'd be okay. You still do not meet PhD, but you would meet MDD. Does that make sense? If you'd like to go through any of these calcs, just let me know. I know it's really confusing. Yeah.
And so where it says future supply conditions, number 2,
Oh, yeah, I can go through that. I haven't gone through that, but yeah,
okay.
I can go through it. I was trying to take a break before the future supply conditions, if you had any other questions on the portion above on that page. You want me to go ahead with the future supply? So I think we all know there's several these projects in the works, and I'll just, number 1, Arcalian, number 2, Well 8 centralized facility, number 3, Well 19 with the, and the Arcalian centralized treatment facility will treat wells 12, 13, and 17. It will also have a 1 million gallon storage tank, and that will pump 6,000 gallons per minute, so it's a pretty good size tank with a decent sized booster pump station. So that will tremendously help your PhD, your peak hour. The well 8 centralized treatment plant will be expanded to treat the well 8 replacement, well 8A, and a future well 18. That's the well behind, what's that Mexican restaurant there? Vias. Yeah. There's an empty lot there. Oh, I can, let's see, since we have the map here, might as well.
We have a slide for it too.
Yeah, you want?
No, we have a slide for it.
Yeah, we have a slide. So.
Want me to point?
It's
the blue.
I think this
blue
is
one.
well 18.
Yep.
Here. And so well 18 is a new well. Nothing has been done on that. That's the well that Foster Farms had. They actually have an agreement with the well driller to do a test well. They're the ones that did the well 19 over here on the other side here. But it has not been drilled. Well 19 was drilled what, a couple years ago? Yeah. A year and a half or so. Yeah. And then well 18 will have a pipe going with raw water, untreated water to the well 8 expanded side that will treat 8A, 18, and 9. So that's that one. Well 19, it's by itself out here. It's more or less a replacement for 11. And it will have its own, we call it a wellhead treatment plant. Because to have pipelines coming all the way away is really challenging. So it will have its own TCP treatment plant. And then the treated water will be connected here to the Campbell pipeline by the Foster Farms restaurant. So once these, and you can go to the last, I think that's the last page of this. Once you do, you have those online, your total production will be 11,300, which is quite a lot more than what you would need, and PhD would be at 16,003. So that would leave you a reserve of about 25% in terms of what you can provide and what the demand would be. Of course, these are still some time out.
Okay, I think you just got to my question.
Yeah.
When you say some time out,
Yeah, we'll go through
Okay.
that.
because we have here, in the forecast, we have 8A and then 19.
19,
Which is-
8A, 19, and 18 in terms of wells, yes. And we're going to go through that.
Got it.
I wanted to kind of go through this, this assessment in a little more detail, because it's really confusing. It's a lot of numbers and a lot of criteria. But do any of you have any questions on the assessment itself for now? We can always come back. But. So I think we can move on.
Okay, next we'll be discussing the progress that the city of Livingston is taking towards improving the drinking water system and compliance for removal of TCP, as well as these source capacity. A lot of this Mario just spoke on, but we'll go ahead and go over it again and a little bit more details with some of it. The first project that we have listed here was well number 16 and 14, centralized treatment, which is the red line there on the map. That included a raw water line from well 14 to well 16, and the installation of a GAC filtration system at the well 16 site for the removal of TCP, and that treats wells, both of those wells, 14 and 16 at the site there. The city received their funding agreement for execution in September 2018 for $4 million, and Final execution of the agreement was received in January of 2019, with construction of that project was completed in 2021. The loan repayment was included in the new rate study, and the city is currently making payments on the low interest loan now. As a quick overview again of some of the planned projects coming up, we have them listed out here, and then we'll go into the following slides. We'll show like the actual site locations and a little bit more detail for the scopes on them. As Mario mentioned, project number 2 is our Killian Park with the centralized treatment for wells 12, 13, and 17, along with the 1 million gallon storage tank. Project 3 is well A site expanded centralized treatment, which will treat waters from well 8A, 9, and 18, and that'll include the 1.5 million gallon storage tank. Project 4 is for well number 18, which will be piped over to well 8A site for the treatment. And then well 19 will be constructed and will include its own wellhead treatment as well on that. The original drinking water state revolving fund application for this was submitted in December of 2018. The revised scope was submitted in 2021, and what that did was added the treatment for well 12 and added the new wells for 18 and 19. So with that and the revised application, it does take some time for that to all process with it. There's 4 packages that are included with it, which I won't really go into all of them, but they have to redo environmental documents, which have already been completed, update financial documents. And that some of these items are actually still being requested. I was actually received an email today from the state asking for some updated information on the financials for the existing TCP funds, just to see where they're at and where they've been spent so far. And then the agreement for this project is expected in late 2024.
And there were further revisions just last year.
Yep. Yeah, further revisions in 2023 for the application. And again, that was, a lot of it had to do with the funding, just because over the last few years, we've seen the prices of construction material and all that equipment just really escalate. So that was included in that. And then this funding agreement for it is expected to have a 75% grant and a 25% loan. And overall completion is expected to be in 2027 with all of these projects.
So all these, the ones that are ongoing should be 75-25. The original one was a loan, the one for well 16 was that $4 million loan.
So, considering that if everything goes well and as planned, and hoping that we do have the agreement with 75% being a grant and 25% being a loan, what would that, do we have a forecast on what that 25% would be?
Yes. We have that, I think, towards the end of the presentation.
Okay. Next slide is the overall.
Famous map right there.
Does anybody want me to go over that again? I know Mario pointed at it and went over all the locations. If not, then I'll just.
See how bad I can shake. So there's 12, 17 going into Arcalian, and this is 13 going into Arcalian. So I will treat those 3 wells. This one will have a million gallon tank. And over here, we have 19 with the wellhead treatment plant and the pipeline of treated water
And then on this slide, we have the overall layout for our Killian Park centralized treatment, just to give you an idea of the footprint of the site. Can I have that, Mario? So let's see if we can do that. Coming in from the west, we will have well 13. Well 12 and 17 will be coming in from the south. Here's the 1 million gallon storage tank, which will be partially buried on site. And then the location for the treatment vessels. The site will also include emergency backup generators to run the booster pumps in case the power ever goes out with that. And it'll also have a chemical and electrical building here.
That tank being semi-buried is for aesthetic reasons, so you only have a little piece sticking out of it. Some agents, some cities are able to use it as a place to do some art or something, since it's in the middle of the park.
Okay, here's the well 8 centralized treatment facility. Existing well 8 is over here, and the existing treatment vessels are these 4 here. So this will be expanded out to, right now it shows 4 vessels and 4 future vessels. This may be included with, all 8 of those may be included with the project for it, depending on what we actually get production-wise from well 8A, and then as we keep moving forward with well 18, and see what is projected for those as well. And then this has the 1.5 million gallon storage tank, the booster pump station that'll go into distribution, and then here's the location of well 8A, which is currently in construction. As far as new wells, there's well number 8A, which is the replacement of existing well number 8, and that project is currently in construction. And then well 18 and 19, as we already mentioned, are in the design and planning phase still. Well number 8A, as I mentioned, is in construction, started in September 2023, and anticipation for that is expected to be completed at the end of this year. Just to give you another reference for it, the existing well 8's there, and the new well is over here about 200 feet away. This project also includes the installing new electrical equipment and service from MID, as well as a backup generator that's all sized for ultimate build-out, which includes the booster pump station and all the other equipment that will be on site. So a couple things with well 8A. This sheet here is kind of summarizing some of the water quality and sample results that we're seeing. This started with a test well which was completed in 2020, and the purpose of that was to identify the areas of water producing stratas, as well as take samples of the existing or of the groundwater for quality to see what would be ideal for the design of this production well. The primary contaminant that was looked at with this one was arsenic. Just historically speaking with the city, we wanted to try to stay away from that as much as possible. Arsenic has an MCL, which is a maximum contaminant level of 10 micrograms per liter. So the idea was to stay below the 10 with these numbers here. So we did 4 samples collected with this project with the test well, and between the depths of 158 to 168 feet, that's how deep it was for it, there was arsenic was not detected. And then between 270 and 280, the arsenic came in at 7.5, which is still good, below the 10. And then between 323 feet and 333 feet, the arsenic resulted in a 3.1 micrograms per liter, which is even better than a little bit above. And then you can see the sample that was collected between 409 and 419 was quite a bit different. It was up to 39, which is well above the MCL. So with that, we designed the well to stay above that depth, we actually designed the well for the screen sections on it, and we have a picture of it on the next slide. The production casings between 220 feet and 340 feet, trying to stay out of that arsenic level as much as possible. Since then, we have had the well's been drilled and developed, and during development, we did additional testing for this, which is this graph over here, which shows the overall arsenic level from the well. And just to give it a reference here is in June of 2020, based on the depths that we were looking at, the arsenic level was well, 6 or 7. It was below 10 for sure.
About 5.
Yeah, about 5. And that was at a depth as long, above 333 feet with the test well. In October of 2023, that's when the test well was, or the actual well itself was being developed and pumped. And the arsenic then came in at 9.6, which was just borderline of the MCL for it, which kind of was a concern just based on the test well. There was nothing really supporting that kind of a change with arsenic. Usually it doesn't have that kind of big jump or anything like that with it. And then so we retested it in February of 2024, and the arsenic jumped again, now up to 15 with the overall discharge on that, which is again out of the ordinary for that, and the whole reason why we stayed. We went only to 340 feet with the depth of that, and I'll get more into that a little bit as we go with this. But just to give you a couple reference points here for the arsenic concentration, just at that 335 feet depth, which is this one right here, right around this, the 333. In 2020, with the test well, the arsenic concentration was 3.1, and when we retested that depth in February, it was now up to 33 micrograms per liter. So it went up 10%, which isn't really, it went up 10 times, which is, there's not really an explanation for that kind of a change or increase. I don't know if there's something with the testing or what, but we're looking into doing additional testing again, just to confirm this and figure out what that is. Another item that we considered with that is well 8 is 200 feet away from where the well 8A is being drilled, which is down to a depth of 290 feet. And since we had that one retest in March of 24 just to give us a comparison, and well 8, the existing well, came in at 3 micrograms per liter. So again, you would think with those two wells being as close to each other and constructed relatively similar, they would have again, similar results, which isn't really making sense with that.
So when these tests are being done, are they sent out to like outside agencies?
Yeah, lab,
Right?
certified lab.
Yeah, and then was it a different lab?
I don't know.
I-
Different lab. Do you remember?
The laboratory uses BSK out of Fresno, and it's the same lab that was used previously. All sampling are performed by our staff, which are certified samplers as well.
And so when those samples are taken, is it like one sample or multiple samples at the same time, and all of them are tested and to kind of, compare and,
Yeah.
okay. So at this point, considering that, well, I think you already answered the question, but between 323 and 333, that is like the safest area to be at right now, right? Because we're under that threshold that is required, but that's only like 30.
It's a very small area.
Yeah, so it's only like 30 feet deeper than the original current 8.
Yeah, you really can't just use 10 feet of perforation. So think it's on the next slide, what I think the city is going to have it tested again in smaller sections. There's ways that you can test a well isolating the bottom and the top, and you just test that zone there and move it up and move it up. And I know we're working with the contractor to get a quote on doing those, and those are not really that expensive to do. The whole thing is kind of bewildering, you know, because arsenic is a very is a very stable contaminant. It's naturally occurring, so it's not from pollution. So it's a naturally occurring element, very stable. All the trends on increases or decreases is over a long period of time. If you look at these, between October and February, it's a crazy difference. I mean, it's just, yeah.
So,
Hopefully there's some issue with the testing, and we don't know. That's why I
Okay.
think we need to perform some more detailed testing, and then go from there. And then there's several options that Nick will go through here. But yeah, it's very, very, I don't know how many wells we've done, probably dozens, and this is a new one.
so you mentioned that well 8, the one that we're trying to replace, is at 290, right?
Correct.
290. And just probably because I've been asked this question, and probably we can help paint that picture, why are we moving away from well 8?
Because there's site restraints, and it's only 200 feet. In terms of water, it'll be the same strata, you know. So in terms of wells, that's very, very close. You really can't go close to where the well 8 is physically located, because there's a lot of constraints with facilities. And so that's the closest that we could get to well 8 within that site. The other thing you're still gonna have to have well 8 going while this one's being built, because you can't just take well 8 out of service. So it's gonna be still going, and we don't want the two wells to be, we call them fighting, you know, there are these cones of depression, one is stealing water from the other.
No,
So you cannot have it. The only way you can do at the same site is if you have an open field with no site restrictions, you abandon one and drill a hole right next to it, which is not the case.
so my question was more like, why are we trying to replace 8 with 8A? Are we,
You already have your treatment facility there, which is treating well 8. So the treatment plant is already there. So we need a well in that vicinity, and that's the location that made the most sense.
no, I get that, but,
I could add a little bit.
Go ahead.
Mayor, well 8 is the city's oldest well that we have in service at this time. It's 30-plus years old. It had numerous repairs on it already. The casing is starting to fall apart internally, so it is time to drill a new well, which we have.
yeah, okay. So I just wanted it to make sense of why we're having to build a new well.
It should be in that vicinity, you know, give or take a few feet, you know. And in terms of wells, 100 feet, 200 feet is not, and you don't want them to be too close, because then they'll fight each other.
Yeah, and so, other than being too old and it's, you know, eventually it's gonna be more cost-effective to build a new one,
Yes.
other than that, being new, we're really only looking at 30 feet deeper to be safe right now based on the levels of arsenic.
From the data that we have, that might, yeah, I'm not quite sure about the numbers, but yeah, it's
Yeah.
something that we need to sort through, because it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
So other than waiting for additional testing, right now, we're looking to stay at between 323 and 3.
No, so excuse me, the new well is going to be screened. Here, let me go to the
Yeah,
next
go to
sheet
the
real
next
quick.
one.
So here on the next screen, we have the the cross-section of the new well. So here will be the concrete pedestal at the top where you'll be able to see. And then down here at 220 feet to 340 feet is going to be the screened section. And then the pump will be installed above that screened section. So when it starts running, it's going to be sucking water all through the screened area. So from 220 to 340 is where it's going to be drawing in all the water from those depths.
Which one that was designed for those depths based on the results from the test well?
I have a question. Is there going to be a filtration system in that well, 8A?
8A, yeah, it's going to go into the TCP treatment plant. So 8 will be abandoned, and then 8A will go, let's see, yeah, if you go back, yeah, there you go. So.
Yeah, so existing well 8 is right here in the building, and it comes out of the building, gets piped over to the GAC system, and then comes back out through distribution. Well 8A over here will be piped and then tied back into that same inlet point of connection and go through the existing GAC system and then out to distribution.
So we're utilizing as much of the existing facilities as we can, actually utilizing some of the, there's a little building there by the existing well 8 with controls, and we're using the same building, so we don't have to use it. The controls will be all different, but at least the building you can see.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Roth, just to add a little bit more to your question, I'm not sure if you meant the treatment there, the filters there. There are going to be filters there that are going to treat for TCP, but not for arsenic.
So are we going to add that down the line?
That's why we're going to have
I think that's important. If the
additional
levels are,
testing.
yeah, if the levels are that high, that should be filtered out.
correct. But we have to confirm testing to confirm that those numbers are really staying at that level.
Got it,
Because
thank you.
As Mayor said, that we're safe at 330 and above, but those are based off the 2020 numbers.
One more to this one.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so.
Yeah, so there's the possible, so at this point, the possible solutions to address that.
Yeah, so as of right now, we're looking at doing additional testing for this, doing it again at different depths, trying to locate or confirm the areas that are higher concentration for production of arsenic. So we are reaching out to the contractor on that. With that being said, depending on what we find, we might be able to shallow the bottom, or shorten it a little bit. The overall depth, they could just fill the bottom of the well in, or they might be able to blank the casing. So instead of it being screened to where water can come through now, they'll just go in through and put a solid piece of steel in there.
The new tests show a localized, really bad area of arsenic. Then you can actually blank that, you insert it's kind of like a sleeve. It goes in there and it pops out, and it just blanks that. That well is 16 inches diameter, it's about like this big.
So in addition to looking at additional sample testing, there is the potential that we could add arsenic treatment to the project. Based on current projections, it would probably cost about $1.5 to $2 million to construct arsenic filtration for this. Right now, we're looking into the option of expanding the current DWSRF application to include the arsenic treatment. I've reached out to them just as a conversation standpoint, and they came back and said at this point they're not able to make that determination until I actually include that in the application and submit that. But then again, changes to the application will result in additional delays, most likely with their funding. So that's a couple options we're looking at right now. And then short-term solutions is blending that water from the new well with the existing distribution water, or blending it with existing well number 8. So, and that all that is doing is if one has a higher concentration and one has a lower, when you mix the wells together, it'll just dilute what's actually going into the system.
So the system would actually be under the MCL, but that's just a short-term solution.
So if eventually, scenario, if it's decided to include a arsenic treatment in that well, could there potentially be the option of still going in deeper? Or
Leave it as is.
leave it as is, because even all that other extra arsenic will be too much for the,
It depends on, you can design the treatment, take care of whatever concentration, it's on the sizing of the vessels and that sort of thing. You can't really, in terms of the well is, the production well is constructed, so the openings are what they are. Now, we can reduce them, you can either go from the bottom up, or you can blank bands. And that's, you cannot expand any of it, So, the screens are basically where they're at.
And based on the test well we did with the arsenic just shot way up the further you got when you got below 400 feet. And as far as like the sustainability of the well, it wasn't really, when they were developing it, it wasn't really showing the water dropping, it never got down to like 200 feet or anything like that, where like as a long-term concern that the water's dropping that far down for it to where it's too shallow or anything like that.
It's a very good producing well in terms of water quantity, and you can sustain high volumes of water. You probably can get close to 2,000 gallons out of it. It's just now, all of a sudden, there's this a quality issue, this arsenic.
when test wells are done, are they done like in low numbers, as like 200 feet instead of?
No, they're done at whatever number, depths we selected. The test well for this well, I think, was 500 feet.
500.
Yeah. So there's a hole,
Yeah.
it's a small hole.
Yeah,
500 feet. You get samples of the strata, of the dirt, what comes out of that, and that you see if it's a good water-bearing strata. So if it's gravelly and sandy, then it's normally really good. If it's clay, it's no good. So given the potential good water-bearing strata, then there's a test that's done that checks for potential quality issues or potential good quality. So you just blend those two main criteria together, the water-bearing strata with the good quality strata. Then from those, you select your depths for screening.
and so I guess still the big question is where the arsenic came from, if it wasn't detected back when that test well was done.
And the other, that's a mystery right off the bat. The other one is from October to last month,
Yeah,
it just skyrocketed. Same hole, same everything.
yeah, went up 50%.
So we'll go ahead and do the testing at smaller intervals, and basically there's a plug in the bottom, a plug on top, a pump in the middle, and you just get it from that area.
So here's just an aerial location for the proposed location for well number 18 at the corner of Davis and White. Again, the raw water from this well will be treated for TCP removal at the centralized TCP plant at well 8. And this project will include a new well, the building, emergency backup generator, and site surface improvements. And as Mario mentioned earlier, this has a test well pending right now. It's Foster Farms is in contract with Quality Well Drillers for drilling the test well, and that hasn't been completed yet. And then the other item is the city still needs to acquire the property for this location, which there's been conversations and meetings and with Foster Farms over the past couple of years on this one.
So this one is one that's furthest behind.
Okay, here's the location for well 19. Again, this will have similar layout to well 18 with the new building, the well, emergency backup generator. This one will include wellhead treatment, so include GAC filtration vessels and a treated water line that goes to distribution at the intersection of Stefani and Campbell. This test well was completed in 2022, and similar to well 18, the city also needs to acquire this property as well.
You know, there were three locations where there were appraisals done about a year and like 3 months or a year and 4 months ago. And so the city did acquire the piece for well 8A, but I believe that the other two have not been negotiated. 18, my understanding, will be just a purchase from Foster Farms. That 19 may be a combination of a purchase and maybe an easement, because the city will need to have an easement along the railroad there, tying it closer to Campbell. Yeah. And those are all been appraised, but the appraisal is over a year old.
And then, so are we planning to do, well, I think I already know the answer, but are we planning to do test wells on that property?
19 has been, the test well has been done.
Okay, and when was that? That was
Done
2022.
Yeah.
22. And then considering the drastic changes in the other well, are we considering to do additional testing just to kind of be safe?
That would be great if those test wells are normally destroyed after they're done, so there's no test well anymore.
Mm.
So we can do another test well. They cost about $100,000 for a test well.
That's it?
Yeah.
Mm.
It's peanuts. Huh?
Jason, can we borrow 100,000?
Yeah. Well, I know that one Foster Farms paid for, so maybe they can do another one. That's all, negotiating type of thing. Because they're supposed to pay for the well 18. So, yeah.
Well, we have to figure something out whenever the time comes for that well, because we don't want to be stuck in the same situation, or at least even if we do, we got to know how to approach it, instead of waiting until, well, I mean, I guess it's never really a way to
Predict that, but yeah, I get your point.
Mario and team, I do have a question because I think this is relevant. When we look at the additional cost for testing related to arsenic, anywhere from $1 million to I think $2 million for that.
For treatment?
For treatment. So the question is, how does the city go about identifying a potential well location? Because if we look at, let's say that this, we run the risk of adding treatment for arsenic, nitrates, TCP. At some point, it may make sense to look at other alternative locations that may not require that type of
Right.
treatment. So how does a city like Livingston get information related to, okay, we've got 10 test locations. We've identified that these are the top locations that need maybe the minimal level of treatment, and that's why this is being recommended. So
Right.
how does that happen, and then how are these locations identified?
There's, I guess the answer is basically a two-pronged answer. There's trends on quality and production in terms of subsurface data, so it's hydrogeological information. Normally, you get better water on the north side or south side, so there's areas, and this is by comparing existing wells, and that's not just city wells, there's a lot of other, like irrigation wells, water district wells, even smaller farm wells. Those are normally real shallow, so for our type of well doesn't really come in. But the last and best way to verify that is when you do your test well. You do your test well, and that's the real location where you're going to be, and that's going to give you the quality data that you need. When we do these test wells, we run what's called a Title 22 analysis. So you check everything that you can check to make sure that it's within the MCLs, that it's well within the parameters that you want when you go and design a production well. So doing the test well is basically your insurance under normal circumstances. This one is a real odd thing because the test well was done. It showed good results, and then 2 years later, it's changing, and then 4 months later, it's really changing. Did that answer your question, Christopher?
Yeah, it was more just general information. In the future, when we talk about building additional capacity for the system, there will probably, from what I heard you say, a review of the hydrogeologic conditions, identify where those locations would be potentially, doing some test wells and identifying what is the best option for the city.
Cities normally have constraints with locations because you can't just build it wherever would be ideal because you don't own the property or it's right in the middle of the subdivision or whatever. So there's those constraints, but given whatever is available to the city in terms of parcels, then you start with that and narrow it down by where you think the best water is going to be, and then go and drill a test well and verify that, yeah, it's good, no, it's no good. All right, we're almost there. This is just a recap of water line replacements. There's been a few through the years, and the last sizable one was already 5 years ago, almost 5 years ago, was that phase 3. Phase 4 is actually on hold. The city was going to do it, I think, in 2021, I believe, but then decided to hold off, so it's still on hold. So that's, a lot of the city lines are newer lines, so you're actually in pretty good shape in terms of distribution lines. You don't have a lot of those old, decrepit water lines, or a lot of AC pipe, which is asbestos concrete stuff.
So this Phase 4 was put on hold, and you're saying that, I mean, it's still in pretty good, I mean, shape. What would you forecast the,
Yeah, it was more a preventative, and I forget exactly the location for Phase 4, because it's been
Walnut?
a few years. Yeah, I see it here on the, yeah. So it's something that the city probably is going to want to take a look at here in the near future.
What would be the near future? Well, at least for the future
Yeah,
councils to
in
know.
a year or 2 or 3,
Okay.
yeah, that would be the near future, yeah. And you may be, that's a good candidate for like a CDBG grant.
So-
Which you've had some here. I think some of these other phases were done with CDBG grant.
Phase 3 was.
Yeah. So that would be a good candidate for that.
And who would make that decision?
The
Council?
city would,
I mean, well, council or city manager?
probably both,
Okay.
either or both.
Just a little bit of background there. I think we use, and I don't remember the name of the consultant, to do these CDBG applications. They don't do them for free. There is a cost.
Adam Zashki.
So there is a cost associated with them. And so that's how that process would go. If it's below $10,000, it's something that could be handled in my office. If it's above $10,000, obviously that requires the council to approve that allocation of funding for that.
Yeah, it'd be over 10,000. The CDBG applications take a little bit of effort, and one of the constraints with CDBG is making sure that the area where this is going to be built is disadvantaged, and it's based on MHIs and things of that nature. But yeah, the city has been successful in the past with those.
Mario, this Phase 4 that's included here, have any plans been, excuse me, any plans been designed, or because one of the questions that came up on Sunday during the Sikh parade was, when we get requests from whether it's Congressman Duarte's office or Senator X, Y, and Z office, sometimes we're trying to identify projects that we can submit. And one of the questions that comes up is from council members, because this came up on Sunday, was, what do we have on,
Shovel ready.
what do we have on the shelf that we could theoretically submit to these assembly members, say senators or congress members? Is this a project that you would, no? Okay. So while,
Talked about a few years back, I think we did like maybe a little concept like that, but never got past it.
is there anything that you have that you're aware of that would be eligible to submit when it comes to any sort of water improvements?
Yeah, I mean, when you go after money like that, if it's like earmarked, those you just need a conceptual drawing. It'd be a little more than that, but not much. So there's really no design. And water lines, because they're not gravity systems, they're pressurized systems, you just show a line and it'll work. And then if you do get funded, then you have to design it properly. But in terms of having conceptuals for water projects is not a really big thing.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, theoretically, you would be able to provide me something with this, for instance, maybe add a couple details, and this could theoretically be a project that we would ask, let's say, Congressman Duarte's office for funding.
Push for it, yeah.
Okay.
You could do that, yeah. As long as the funding agency doesn't require full-fledged plans, like in the old days, shovel-ready was a very commonly used term, and that was during the Obama administration. You have stuff that's shovel-ready. This is not even close to shovel-ready, but you probably can put a conceptual together.
The reason I ask that is because Congressman Duarte's office has notified us that they've got their application period open for submittal of projects, and the mayor, obviously identified this as being something that we could theoretically send over to them. So I'll connect with you and get some more details. I understand that project, or the request for applications doesn't necessarily need to be full-fledged project, so this may be an opportunity to submit via our Congress member.
Normally earmarks don't require full-fledged plans or design.
So even with phase 4 being on hold, you don't have like a conceptual plan prepared?
Yeah, something like that, basically show them where it's at.
And, but from what I just understood in this conversation is that that would be something that would be submittable. Should they-
A little nicer than that, but yeah.
Get on
Take
it.
a whole lot. What's that?
I said, get on it.
If the city so wishes, we will.
Well, we have need.
Well,
I would think as our engineer that these would already be shovel-ready projects.
They would be if the city gives us the go-ahead to. I can't just
Oh,
go
okay.
design things and send you a bill. It doesn't work that way. So we do have to have direction from the city, and we're glad to do it. We actually had started a few years back, had it on the backlog to do it, and they said, oh, then just stop it now. But we can revive that one to a level that's probably good enough to go through a politician for the year mark type of thing.
I'll
Or
let
if
you
the
have that
city
conversation with Christopher.
Yeah,
Thanks.
or if the city wishes to actually do a full-fledged design, yeah, we can do that too. It's up to the city, but we will need some direction on that. We can talk about it and get some direction. Okay, last, is it last one? Yeah, last one.
Okay, as far as project summary and cost, again, this just reiterates the different projects broken out with the colors that were associated with the aerial map we looked at before. If you look at TCP 1 project, that was 14 and 16, that was already completed in 21. The TCP 2 for Archelian, if you look at the cost on that, originally it was 8.5 and was increased to, in the revision, to 15.5. That cost did increase, but overall the cost of the city has decreased because originally the project was written around the city being receiving 100% loan, which 100% payback on it, and now it's set up for a 75% grant, 25% loan. So the overall cost for the city is less if you underneath the third column there. And we have that one listed with the anticipated completion of 2026. The Well 8 centralized plant, similar situation with the cost increasing. Some of that has to do with additional pipelines that were added, additional filter vessels anticipated. When we have that one listed with the completion of 2027. In the green location there, Well 8A, that's a city-funded project, which is expected to be completed later this year. And then Well 18 and Well 19, those have the dollar amounts listed there with completions for 2027 and 2026. Those have, if you look under the funding source for those, it kind of lists out the loan, grant, city funded, and then the bottom one lists out the loan, grant, or foster farms. And the reason is there's been a lot of conversations over the last few years about foster farms paying for part or not paying for part, depending on the property and who has ownership of the well and everything. As of right now, that's all included in the grant application. So that includes the two treatment projects, the new Well 18 and Well 19 with the treatment. That's all included in the DWSRF application. So with those projects that are included in the application, it has a total grant request, or a total amount of $42 million, with 75% of that being grant and 25% loan. And then as far as the completion dates listed there, there's obviously some variables on that with direction from the city as far as preference, one side over another, and priorities with that. But that's what we have listed as anticipated right now.
Yeah, this one doesn't include that $1 million from Senator Caballero.
So normally, like in that case with the Arquillian project, that $1 million would go towards the city
Yeah, it
amount.
can, we actually, Tony and I had a conference call with the state on that. That's as long as it's, I know that I think the original paperwork said Arquillian part, but now that the state understands this is more of a comprehensive big water, probably several phases of a big water project, that, that it can be spent on any of these components. Yeah. Did I relay that correctly, Tony? Yeah, that's what I understood. Yeah. Okay.
I'm not sure if we covered this, Mario, if this question has been asked, or if I missed it on the slide, but worst-case scenario, city conducts additional sampling of well 8A, and the arsenic levels stay elevated, and we have to progress in arsenic treatment. What kind of time delay will this put on the treatment portion of that project for well A and securing? Because I know there's quite a bit of a lead time on electrical
materials.
Controls. And
Right.
Sure.
We don't know the exact answer to that, but I think Nick mentioned a couple of years. Yeah. And the cost would be $1.5 million, $2 million?
Yeah.
So you basically would have to add more vessels with different media in there, that instead of treating TCP, will treat other element, in this case arsenic. Arsenic and manganese, you can actually treat both of them with the same vessel, same media.
And so just for clarification, are they all in the process, or are they all in the process of applications being submitted?
Yeah, you can answer.
Yeah, so it's all combined right now as one massive application. So that's the 2 treatment projects and the 2 new wells with the wellhead treatment. So that's all one massive application, and then it can be constructed in phases or all together. It's a massive project, so it's, constructability of it and
Yeah,
everything like that
yeah.
can be sequenced.
It most likely should, well, I would think that it would want to do it in phases, because some of these are further along than others. So you probably would want to phase some of them, maybe make 2 or 3 different phases.
Well, also the other thing that we've seen and has to be taken into consideration is the raise in price and cost.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah, we're ready yet to really
Yeah.
bump these up, obviously. There's still good cushion there, and in anticipation of further increases.
all right, thank you.
So there's a good contingency.
Mayor, just a couple things. I know that the engineering team and I had a meeting with the state water folks, and one of the questions that they asked us was, what would the city's capacity be to take on some of the costs associated with the projects? And so we weren't in a position to say yay or nay, but we needed to hear what the state had to say with that. I bring that up because if the state potentially comes back and says, well, we're able to cover this amount, and the city's expected to cover X amount, well, there's probably a conversation related to how that gap is covered. So that goes back to a conversation related to rates. And the other part of that, too, is I think the completion of 8A, 18, and 19 will add about 20% capacity additional?
Yeah, 25.
25% additional capacity.
And the tanks.
and with the tanks. So the question really is about if the city were to, expand its population base, potentially annex different portions of the community, the question, looking long-term, is really for the council, what level of additional capacity would be a good amount to have to add additional portions into the city? So that's something related to, again, part of the rates, and then, master plans for the facility. Something we haven't talked about because it wasn't in the intent of this presentation, but also the wastewater side, because there's additional capacity. As we talk about water capacity, probably need to have a conversation related to what we do on the wastewater side. So I bring those up just to get those on the radar of the council, not any action that's needed here tonight, but just to get it on the radar. I know that we've had conversations individually about those things, but it's a good opportunity to just add those there, that there's some moving pieces there that if the state comes back and expects the city to contribute some level of funding, we probably will need to have that conversation should that come up. Thank you, Mayor.
And most of those, if I may add, as the city grows and as new development, all that development needs to provide its own infrastructure or pay for it in terms of water. And that's why you need master plans. You do not really have any master plans that are up to date. And, so it all starts with the general plan and then trickles down. You will need all the master plans. So you don't, in the absence of that, it's challenging. So specifically with water, if you have a water master plan, which is based already, should be based on your general plan, then you have the philosophy, you know what the philosophy of the city is, you know how to go about it, and the master plan will basically direct how to achieve what the city's intentions are. So, but you don't have those yet. Hopefully you should be working on getting those in place.
So based on what you just mentioned, in regards to grow, and they should be responsible for that additional growth need, why was that not part of, or maybe you can provide some, if it was part of the conversation when those 480 unit project was brought over, not only through planning, but also.
Right. And it was, our engineering actually commented on that when ultimately that was not included in the conditions. I couldn't tell you why, but yeah, we always make sure to include that. And when you get it, and 408, that's a pretty good size already, but sometimes you have 200 acres developing, you have to master plan all that. So it depends on the sizes of development.
So normally with a project like the 480 units project, that would be a recommendation from your office to.
It was recommended to the city.
To planning, to the planner,
Yes.
And then the planner will make his recommendation to the planning commission?
Normally, yeah, the different departments should be consolidated into one set of conditions of approval. And sometimes some of the things are removed for whatever reason. That I couldn't tell you why.
So, but that was something that was included, but then it was removed at the planning stage?
Yeah. I don't know, we removed, yeah.
And then-
It was in our engineering conditions of approval for that. And even with all these smaller projects, we look at, water, sewer capacity, are you gonna get rid of stormwater, all of those things.
Okay.
I mean, I hear this conversation and sitting there shaking your head just nonchalantly, like, this all happened. It was brought to planning,
Yeah, it was brought to the city.
but here we're talking, was that in 21, maybe?
Around that time. I don't remember exactly.
3 years later, now we're having that conversation. You started off by saying, well, with that 480 unit, we might be able to hit that maximum capacity.
Yeah, MDD.
Yeah, so looking back on it, I remember who was on planning, and who was on council as well, and who voted for the recommendation. It was a recommendation that came forward knowing, again, it falls back on those master plans and general plans that that prior councils and city managers, I want to say, neglected. That's the only word that I can come up with. Seeing that the future of Livingston depended on many of these projects to serve our community, but continuing to deplete our water makes no sense, and was actually, here we are, being faced with having to make decisions. And
Council, are there any other questions? Questions, comments? Well, let's just hope that everything goes through and we get some support with the funding. By when will you expect to know that results of that additional testing on 8A?
Probably a couple of months, Nick?
Yeah, I think we could probably get testing scheduled in the next month or so for it, maybe, probably next month or so for it. And then it just depends on the amount of time it takes from the lab to get the results. And I think last time it took a couple weeks, so maybe 2 months or so before we actually have clear results on current testing, sampling.
All right, so from my end, I would like to, and I know that this conversation will happen soon eventually in regards to having some kind of plans to where I can be able to present those as when requested for possible earmark funding. I know that I have a deadline for Monday for whatever we have that we might be able to submit. But we got to start thinking about 2025.
Sure.
And the sooner, I know that this will be some conversations happening to hopefully get those things.
Right, yeah, whatever the city wishes, yeah.
Yeah.
If you wish to have some conceptuals or some design, yeah, that's fine.
All right. Anything else?
One final comment that I'll make is, the assumptions that were built into this, or at least the water supply assessment, hinge on the assumptions that Mario had mentioned. Part of the other thing that is really imperative too that needs to be done is that those assumptions include, I believe, the largest producing well offline, but it also assumes that the rest of the wells are operational. So what really needs to happen is the city, and this is the direction that's been provided to the management team, is that assessments need to be conducted on the existing system to ensure that we're doing what we need to do to ensure that that system remains operational, so that we don't have a worst case scenario where we have the top producing well as well as other wells go down. So there's a responsibility that's been placed on the staff to make sure that they're assessing the existing system to make sure that it remains at a highly optimized piece of equipment, so that we don't run into the situation where we have to worry about other pieces of equipment that are down. So that has been the communication to the management team to ensure that we're assessing the system, and then also including those on this future year CIP to make sure that we're not waiting until things fail to replace them, that we're doing the proactive work on the front side to make sure that we're having a system that's highly optimized and performing at its peak performance.
So of the existing wells that we have, which one is the next oldest, or most
I think
critical?
8 and then 9, I think, right?
I don't know. That was a question.
Yes, 9. Up to 8 is 9.
Oh, so these are in like a chronological order?
Yeah, I think virtually all of them are chronological numbering.
All right. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you.
Sure, you're welcome.
So I just.
All righty. Put the thing back.
We're going to go ahead and continue with our regular meeting as okay, so we're calling the regular meeting to order at 7:18 p.m., April 2nd. Next, we have our Pledge of Allegiance. Can we please stand? Can we please remain standing for a moment of silence for our first responders and military members, please? Thank you. May be seated. Roll call, please.
Roll call. Councilmember Roth,
Present.
Councilmember Soto,
Present.
Mayor Moran.
Present.
For the record, Councilmember Mann and Mayor Pro Tem Sammer are not in attendance.
Council, are there any changes to the agenda? Seeing none. Next, we have citizen comments. This section of the agenda allows members of the public to address the city council on any item not on the agenda. Members of the public, when recognized by the mayor, should come forward to the lectern and identify themselves. Comments are normally limited to 3 minutes. In accordance with state open meeting laws, no action will be taken by the city council this evening. Are there any public comment on the phone? Hearing none, coming back to the chamber. Any public comment in the chamber? Citizen comments?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. I just wanted to formally introduce myself. I'm Jim Pacheco, and I'll be the next supervisor, so I look forward to working with the City Council here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations, by the way. That's a big win for us.
Next, is there any other citizen comments in the chamber? Seeing none, we're closing citizen comments at 7:20. Next, we have award presentations and proclamations. Item number 1, we have a presentation by Mayor Moran, proclamation recognizing Dolores Huerta Day. And then I'm going to go ahead and read that. City of Livingston proclamation, whereas activist Dolores Huerta has worked her entire life to improve social and economic conditions for farm workers, is a leader in the fight against discrimination, and is a defender of civil rights, equal rights, and dignity for all. And whereas Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta co-founded the National Farm Workers Association, Dolores Huerta's organizing skills were essential to the growth of the association, and whereas Dolores Huerta overcame the many challenges she faced as a woman, she remained the most talented negotiator, securing services for farm workers in California in 1963 in the form of aid to families with dependent children and disability insurance. And whereas the Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee was an integral part of the farm workers' original organizing and was formed by Filipino workers and led by Larry Itliong, Philip Vera Cruz, Pete Velasco, and Andy Imutan, instrumental to the farm labor movement. And whereas Dolores Huerta focused on women's right for 2.5 years of the feminist majority and encouraged Latinas to run for office. The campaign resulted in a significant increase in the number of women representatives at the local, state, and federal levels. And whereas the most widely known phrase, "Si se puede," was phrase first used by Dolores Huerta in the farm worker movement. And whereas the accomplishments and contributions of Dolores Huerta should be properly memorialized within the history and culture of the United States. Dolores Huerta deserves proper recognition for her numerous sacrifices in the name of justice and the improvement of severely inadequate working conditions. Now, therefore, be it resolved that we, Mayor Jose A. Moran, the Livingston City Council, do hereby declare April 10th, of each year as Dolores Huerta Day. In witness whereof I have set my hand and caused the seal of the city of Livingston, California, to be affixed this second day of April 2024. Next, we have announcements and reports. Do we have any city staff announcements or reports?
Not tonight, Mayor.
City manager?
Just one item, really thoroughly enjoyed my time at the Sikh parade on Sunday. I left the parade with a belly full of food and lots of fun. So thank you, Mayor, council members, for letting me tag along with you all. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Next, we have city council members' announcements and reports. Mr. Roth?
The only thing I have is I have also attended the Sikh parade and the festivities. Always a great time, great food. Seen a lot of community members out there this year, and just good time next year when they have it, and I encourage everyone to go out.
Mayor, was the chief going to do any presentations? I have some questions for him. So, is he going to take questions from the police department?
That was, you mean during citizen comments? No, we don't have any staff reports prepared for today.
Can he take some questions from me?
No.
And why is that?
Because
It would have to be something that's agendized on the agenda in order to comply with the Brown Act. And unfortunately, there's nothing related to the police department on the current agenda as prepared.
Well, from the House Council, they would ask questions, and the police chief, even if he didn't have anything to present, there's some kind of questions.
The time for citizen comments and questions has come and passed without questions being asked. So if there weren't, if a citizen wanted to ask questions that weren't on the agenda, that was the time to do so. Since that has come and now closed, it would be improper to consider that under the Brown Act.
So would you mind opening that part of so I can ask my question? Because I was waiting for him. I thought he was going to present something.
normally when we have staff reports, we normally have it on the agenda. That way, whether it's a particular department, it would be on the agenda.
So, can that part of the citizens' comments be reopened so I can ask my questions?
That would be up to the majority of the council.
It's pretty important.
Generally, that would be if we're doing changes to the agenda, the council can, by motion and majority vote, reopen public comment, but it would take a first and a second.
I think that it would be ideal if we could have that included, for our next agenda so that we can move forward.
If I may, with respect to previous Mayor Pro Tem, do you have a list of questions? Perhaps I could inquire about them during my own report, because I'd like to know. Since it's a citizen request from a resident, we should hear from our residents if he's asked more than once. If that's permissible, I'll take your questions. If not, I'll make a motion to reopen citizen comments.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
You don't want to hear from the residents?
I'll second that.
All right, so roll call, please.
Councilmember Roth,
Yes.
Council Member Soto
Yes.
and Mayor Moran.
Yes.
Motion passes by a vote of 3-0.
So at this time, at 7:28, I'm going to open up citizen comments. Is there any citizen comments? Go ahead.
So I have a couple questions for the chief. Recently, I filed 2 use of forces complaints. I'm not going to get into detail with those. He calls me and tells me that the city manager was investigated 1, and that he was not going to investigate that. And according to paperwork in the office there, he has to investigate these complaints, especially use of force. And when does a city manager investigate a use of force without talking to me, the victim, or any witness, and the case is closed? And if that's true, you guys have 5 years to have that on file from the time that investigation was completed. Is there anything on file from the city manager? Christopher? Do you have a letter for me that the chief said that you guys sent to me?
If I understand correctly, this is an opportunity for the public to address the members of the council, sir.
Okay, so is that correct what I just said, chief? Well, I wouldn't even call him a chief because I sent him an email earlier and he's saying whatever we talked about yesterday was not true. So, like I said, it's the law for him to investigate and not deny my complaints, especially 2 uses of force by his officers. And you guys call it that leadership there? That ain't leadership right there. Leadership starts from the top. If he lies, which he did, I'm calling him a liar, from our conversation yesterday, how do you guys expect the officers of the city of Livingston to be professional and honest with the citizens? He sugarcoated it to me yesterday that he wasn't going to investigate it. Imagine other people that call in and he tells them the same thing and they don't know their rights. What do? Oh, the chief told me no, so that's it. So I would like you guys to consider that guy right there. Reconsider him. Honesty. He's a liar. He doesn't even, that's an embarrassment to the badge that he wears. Yes, you are.
Is there any other additional citizen comments in the chamber? Is there any additional comments, citizen comments on the phone? Hearing none. Closing the citizen comments at 7:32. Next, we have city council. We're going to continue with city council members' announcements and reports. Ms. Soto?
Just for the people that are watching, can either Councilmember Roth or somebody explain what yesterday's parade or the celebration that was held for citizens that weren't able to either participate or join or attend?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question.
Since you attended yesterday's event, would you mind explaining to the public what type of event that was held, the purpose, other than the food is great. We shut down Livingston Main Street in order for this to occur. Can you explain the purpose of the event?
Unfortunately, I don't know the full culture of the Sikh culture. I do know that it represents their beliefs, and they're praising their Bible. And like I said, I do not know the whole culture? That would be best asked by JT or Mayor Pro Tem.
Would you have any input, Jose?
Same. I think other than being a religious festival and a community-oriented festival to where the community, not only the Sikh community, but the entire community, has an opportunity to come together and share a piece of bread. I would not want to provide misinformation as to the accurate details of the meaning of the parade, and especially having to do with religious beliefs. But if you like, I can direct you to where I'm sure Mayor Pro Tem or JT would be able to provide more accurate cultural and religious details about the meaning of that event.
Thank you for that. I was just wondering, since you all attended and invited people, that they should have a better understanding, that we should all have a better understanding of what we, as a diverse and cultural accepting community, that we should know the history of our residents, especially if we are inviting people and letting them know to come celebrate. Is one of I know another question that I had, because this was a city event, how come it was not discussed? And I believe me, it's a beautiful festival, but it was not discussed on a previous occasion as to how either Livingston PD was going to have their part, Public Works was going to have their part, and how we dispersed time, perhaps overtime, because it was on a Sunday. Because I know that the reason why I was asked was because of the drill and kill that I had over, 4th of July. How are we spending that money on city funds? Was there any city monies that were spent in order to have street closures? Were the residents notified? Again, I welcome the celebration. I really do, but those questions are being asked as to why some celebrations are being scrutinized as to the expenditure of funds, and some aren't even brought before the council, and yet we're reporting on them.
Mayor, if I could just add a couple comments. I think those are legitimate questions. I think those are good questions. One of the things that makes a lot of sense in a lot of communities is bringing forward any sort of what we refer to as in-kind services to various events. Typically, in other cities that I've been a part of, there's a period in which residents, community members can request in-kind services from a public agency, and the city council can either approve them, not approve them, or put caps on the amount of resources that go towards a specific event. It probably makes sense to have some sort of conversation with the council about how it would like to proceed in a go-forward manner. We're happy to have that conversation. I think in years past that hasn't necessarily been the case, but we can certainly do that on a go-forward basis. I think it does make sense because, as Councilmember Soto identified, there were some street closures, and that may impact residents' ability to get in and out of neighborhoods. So that's certainly something that we can bring forward. I know that historically there's been 2 parades, 2 each year. And so what we can do, if the council desires, maybe we can create an agenda item for future discussion, put some discussion points on that if that's what the council desires. And I'm sure that later on in the evening, when we have a request for discussion and direction on future agenda items, I'm happy to provide additional context at that time if the council so directs that, Mayor.
So from what I understand is that these conversations didn't take place in public for the spending of in-kind services.
Not that I'm aware of, but I'm not aware of any conversations at the council level.
Well, we didn't have any conversation in regards to the past parade. That's just the point that some residents were wanting to know. The parade took place, so we're here after the fact deciding, well, we can't decide because it's already been done. We have to pay for the services that were rendered amongst our staff without council approving. Pretty sure it would have been approved, but we're working not in public, correct?
I think it's a good opportunity to evaluate that. So if the council so chooses to, put some sort of policies, parameters in place, we're certainly happy to have those conversations, council member. I don't think that there was any sort of intent to mislead members of the council or any members of the community. If I'm hearing you correctly, we're certainly happy to bring forward an agenda item so that the council can weigh in on the types of events that they'd like to support. Happy to have that conversation in the future, council member.
Also for Jose, you had the proclamation, and thank you for bringing that forward. Again, Dolores Huerta was a very impactful Hispanic woman, and beings that you use today to celebrate and provide a resolution or proclamation in her honor. I would just like to add that I am thankful for all the women that have led with their leadership, for women to come forward and be in positions of empowerment. So when we want to celebrate women and identify certain women, I believe that even last month we had the opportunity to identify many, many women, as it was Women Leadership Month. So with me being the only woman up here, I will stand on every woman that has come forward with their triumphs, their successes, their not so successes, but came out on top. And I want to pat myself on the back because I'm still here. So thank you for recognizing Dolores Huerta, but we do need to recognize all women with just as much grace and power and leadership, because we do advocate for many issues, and we're activists in many ways in order to get things done. In order to get things done, sometimes we have to remove those people that tend to slow progress down. So again, all the women out there, thank you for being in leadership. Thank you for empowering and uplifting those in the community. I'm gonna put this out there. There are 3 seats coming up in November. Let's go. Si se puede. Let's go, ladies. And I don't have anything else to report. I may have some questions later.
Let's see. Good pop sombra. So next, my report. Right now, I did attend the Sikh parade on Sunday, and on the weekend, I was able to volunteer in Merced at the wall, at the Vietnam Veterans Wall, or known as the Wall That Heals. And that's, I think that's it for now. Next, we have
Just a question, I know there's no report on the sister cities?
I have that report for next meeting. Next we have consent agenda. Items on the consent calendar are considered routine or non-controversial and will be enacted by one vote unless separate action is requested by a member of the public, the city manager, or the city council member. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless members of the public, city council, or city manager request that specific items be removed. Public comment on consent agenda items should be limited to 3 minutes per person regardless of the number of items contained within the consent agenda. So within the consent agenda, we have items number 2, number 3. Is there a motion? Are there any questions on any of those 2 items, 2 or 3? Or is there a motion?
Make the motion to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor by Councilmember Roth. Go ahead and second that. Roll call, please.
Mr. Moran, can we open?
I'll go ahead and do the public comment on the consent agenda. Is there any public comment on the phone in regards to the 2 items on the consent agenda? Hearing none, is there any public comment in the chamber in regards to the consent agenda items? Bringing it back to the dais, 7:45. Roll call, please.
Roll call. Councilmember Roth?
Yes.
Councilmember Soto?
Yes.
And Mayor Moran?
Yes.
Motion and passes by a vote of 3-0.
Next, we have a public hearing. Item number 4, consideration of an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Livingston repealing Chapter 3, Underground Utility Districts of Title 9 and replacing it with Chapter 3, Underground Utilities of Chapter 9 of the City of Livingston Municipal Code. Staff recommendation, waive the first reading of the ordinance by title only, open the public hearing, close the public hearing, and approve the ordinance as presented.
So Mayor, just a quick background on this item. This item initially came up in 2023. This was an item that the council directed us to look at because there were certain projects in the community, infill type projects that were required to underground utilities. And in that instance, it could be that an entire block had overhead power lines, and the city would, based on its existing code, would require that developer, that landowner, underground those utilities. That would be a pretty significant undertaking for that individual. We brought this issue up to council. The council directed us to amend the Muni Code so that it was more in line with the neighborhoods. If the neighborhood was completely overhead, it didn't make a lot of sense to have this individual infill lot be undergrounded. This was a holdover item from the previous city attorney's firm. Roy took this item up. We've got a few infill projects that are coming up. Before we required those applicants adhere to the existing code, we wanted to make sure that we got council either the thumbs up or the thumbs down on this before we placed conditions on applicants that are looking to move their project forward. So this item is the amended code with respect to the undergrounding of utilities. City Attorney's Office did develop the ordinance itself. We're happy to answer any questions that the mayor and the council may have tonight. Thank you, Mayor.
Council, questions, comments, direction?
How many infill projects do we have, and who are the applicants?
I don't know who the applicants are. I believe that there are 2 right off the bat. Noe may have more information on who those applicants are, but I think there's 2.
How many more projects, how many more areas are residential, correct?
So I'll let Roy talk about the difference between the proposed ordinance and then what's existing now. I think the major one is that previously, all projects, irrespective of what happened, if a house had unfortunately been burned in a fire, they would be required to underground the utilities just as a result of rebuilding their burned-down home. So I'll let Roy talk about those specifics.
Thank you, Christopher. Mayor and members of council, yeah, in reviewing the code, it was pretty restrictive and didn't really give much flexibility. So as Christopher mentioned, so if you have an infill project in a residential neighborhood, whether it's a rebuild from damage or essentially a final utilization of an empty lot, that new project would be required to underground all the utilities, regardless of how the rest of the neighborhood is laid out, which at times could be extremely expensive. And so what we did is in looking at the code, determined like it's, it needed to kind of be scrapped and started over. And what we've attempted to do is provide flexibility to allow projects in residential neighborhoods or other neighborhoods to kind of conform with the demographics of the neighborhood and have that flexibility, but also for areas of new development, things like that, maintain the undergrounding requirements. In addition to also look, because it didn't really look at, the cost. So this also looks at the cost and the distance that it would take, because they're, basically the other code just said, if it's a new project, all utilities have to be undergrounded. So this actually allows for the planning staff, engineering to look at, okay, where is the connection coming from? How much would it be, is it truly feasible to underground from that connection point? Then it also looks at, okay, are you in an existing residential neighborhood that has all power coming from telephone lines? Does it make economic sense to add that burden onto that, either new development or rebuild to do the trenching that it would require to underground those utilities? And so the goal was to try to provide as much flexibility as possible for the city and for the citizens who would be coming forward with any sort of development.
I think if I remember correctly, we had at least one other previous case when there was an infill lot, and I think they came, if I remember correctly, they came before us, or was brought before us, and it was agreed on to continue excuse me, with that overhead, because everywhere else in that area was overhead, and that would have been the only one to be required to be underground. And I do believe that's where this came from, to where I don't see a problem, with continuing with that idea, depending obviously on we're not going to have an overhead wiring and requirement when everything else around it is underground. So I don't see an issue with something like this.
So if I understood you correctly, you just said that the project that came before us, believe it was the project on 5th Street? But I believe you just said that everything around it was
Overhead.
overhead. So you're not seeing a problem,
Changing this.
changing it to underground, allowing them
No, at that time-
remaining over the utilities above?
Yeah, just based on what else is in that neighborhood already. If everything else is overhead, continue with overhead. If everything else is underground in that area, then, go with underground. But based on what we have on the books, there's no leadway right now, it's everyone that builds is obligated to do underground. So every time someone with overhead electrical, connections, they have to come before us every single time so we can make that request or approve that request, that it is okay to go with overhead. So this will fix that. It will update what we currently have on the books.
The other thing that I will add to this is it provides a little bit more clarity. So in the instance of, let's say, an individual that has an infill lot, there may not be a lot of opportunity for that lot to be developed beyond, a single-family residence or, a small project. That it may be cost prohibitive if that's the only opportunity that exists and they are required to put the lines underground. So from a perspective of that applicant, because of the Muni Code and how it's currently structured, we have placed a requirement on them that staff cannot deviate from, which theoretically could kill that project. And we know that we need housing in this community that could theoretically kill that project because it's cost prohibitive, because the remainder of that block may be completely with overhead lines. So what this does is it accomplishes a policy goal of encouraging development in areas that have infill lots and encouraging applicants to put forward plans that create some flexibility so that they aren't bound to do something that is cost prohibitive. And it also provides a little bit more efficiency in the sense that those applicants aren't having to come to council, to the planning commission to get a waiver. And so what this essentially does is it does what a lot of communities have done, is it builds it into the Muni Code so that there's flexibility so that we don't get complaints from the development community of saying, you guys are so slow, we have to take this to the planning commission, we have to take to the city council to get a waiver. So this essentially provides clarity to say, you don't have to go through that process to not underground utilities for your infill project. It's built into the code that if the majority or overwhelming majority of the lots or the area in that block already has overground or overhead lines, you are not required to do that. So it helps provide some efficiency, provide some clarity, and our hope is that it encourages development in infill lots so that they are not overburdened or potentially have costs placed on them that may make a project unfeasible for them.
So with the past projects that have essentially not come before, because I do recall that at one time Mr. Castillo had come and had shared his experience before the council. Back then, under whose authority was given so that they could bypass that whole process of going to planning, asking for a waiver, and then coming to council for approval, because I don't recall some of the projects. I know that there are a few homes that were built in the older parts of Livingston that didn't come before the council. Under whose authority did those projects get approved, but not by council?
So that was before my time. I can't speak to that. I do remember when we had some members of the public come up to speak and say that those requirements weren't placed on their projects. All I can say is that if it's in the Muni Code, there isn't a whole lot of flexibility that staff has to deviate from requirements on developers. This does create the flexibility to allow for some flexibility now. As to what happened prior with other previous city managers, I can't speak to. I can only speak on what we do on the time that I've been here, correct?
If I understand correctly, even with this being part of the municipal code, it was not enforced or it was not supported by previous either staff or management.
Again, I can't speak to what happened previously, but what I can say is that if something is in our Muni code, there isn't a lot of flexibility that staff has to either allow it or not allow it. It is a good practice to stick to your Muni code. I think the city attorney would agree with me on that. It is a good practice for staff to do that. How there were variances or other things granted, I don't know. But again, it is a good practice for staff to follow the Muni code and the requirements that are there. This would allow for some flexibility and not, if someone does seek a waiver, they would have to go through a process that's spelled out in the law. I think it's state law. But in this instance, this would allow some flexibility that's embedded in our code.
So for instance, driving by on F Street, just right behind the church there is a empty lot and it's for sale. So who would be responsible, because it is above, the utilities are above ground, so should this be approved, they wouldn't be required to, I mean, okay, how would I state that? Do they have, so before they sell that property, do they have to, it's going to be the responsibility of the buyer, or?
No, it'd be the responsibility of whoever develops that property. So ultimately, depending on what kind of structure goes in, if somebody's gonna build a single-family residence or a multifamily, depending on the zoning, whoever is developing that project at the time that they bring plans in, then they're gonna have to work with the utility PG&E to set up the connection from the nearest pole to that location. So they don't have to install it at this time. There's nothing required, per this ordinance, there's nothing requiring them prior to the sale to install a connection to the power line. But, you know, anybody that's gonna develop that would have to call PG&E and they set up the connections. And it just, yeah, and PG&E does not underground. So you have to run all the wires and then PG&E just connects. But anything that goes, you know, anything subterranean has to be done by the property owner and has to be trenched to certain depths set forth in the building code. But yeah, PG&E will not do that for you.
Noe, did you have the applicants? Do you know them offhand?
Good evening, Mayor, City Council members, and the public. Noe Martinez from the City Engineer's Office. And to answer your question, Councilmember Soto, there's one project right now that has been considered for this requirement, and that's the B Street triplex project. B Street, the triplex, yeah. Yep, exactly. Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
Is there any additional questions at this time before I go out for public comment? Going out for public comment at 8:02, is there any public comment on the phone in regards to this specific item? Hearing none, coming back to the chamber, is there any public comment in regards to item number 4? Seeing none, bringing it back to the dais at 8:03. So, I mean, so definitely this would provide, or it would encourage people to develop their empty lots without having to go through additional steps, especially if everybody else in that area, it's already either overhead or underground. So I'll make a motion to approve. Have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second it.
Roll call, please. We have a motion on the floor and second by Councilmember Roth.
Roll call, Councilmember Roth,
Yes.
Councilmember Soto,
Yes.
Mayor Moran.
Yes.
Motion passes by a vote of 3-0.
Thank you. And next, we have council directions on future agenda items.
Mr. Mayor, if I may?
Yes.
I'd like to see if we can get a water study for Foster Farms and Emerald Textiles on the next couple agendas, please.
Thank you. Anything else?
I'm in agreement with that. Make sure that's on the agenda, please. Under announcement and reports, again, I want to thank Jimmy Pacheco for coming out. And I've made this request before, seeing that the current supervisor has not attended very many meetings this year or last year. If we could just remove that and just put county supervisor reports, announcements and reports, that would really make a difference, so that if anybody wanted to come and make a report in other districts and share the information throughout the county, that would be permissible, because Rodrigo's not here for whatever reason. But we do have Jimmy, so thank you for coming tonight. And I look forward to your report on Sister Cities next week.
Is there anything else? All right, meeting is adjourned at 8:05.